This is SomerSand with Chats about Improv. And today we have our special guest.
Me, Patti
Patti
Stiles.
Stiles.
Patti Stiles! Yeah!
Welcome, Patti. Many thanks that you join us for a little chat
Thank
about
you.
improv.
Thank you.
Yeah, Patti, can you introduce yourself? Tell us something about yourself.
Sure. Well, first, I'd like to say hi to everybody and to acknowledge that I'm coming to you on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. So I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, um, which means I'm coming to you from Australia. That's where the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, the Kulin Nation, live.
Mhm.
Um, what can I tell you about me? My name is Patty. Uh, I guess because it's an improv chat, keep it to improv stuff. So I've been improvising for, I think this is like my 40th year anniversary. I think it is. Wow.
Okay.
Oh,
Holy
wow.
toot. Yeah. Uh, and I started at the Loose Moose Theatre Company in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And the Loose Moose Theatre was the company that Keith Johnstone was the artistic director of. So he is my mentor, teacher. That's my dog, whose name is Desi.
Daisy.
And that sound would be my husband Chris coming home.
Okay. Funny.
So Keith Johnstone, my mentor, my teacher, my friend. Um, and I was also had the great privilege of learning from that first generation of improvisers who created theater sports with Keith. So Dennis Cahill and Frank Tutino and Tony Tutino, Venus Sood, Dave Duncan, Rick Hilton, Vanessa Valdez, Kathleen Foreman, Jim Curry, this group of improvisers that are really just fundamental teachers in my early improv career.
Okay, well, that's very impressive.
It
So,
is. Wow.
yeah. So today, in today's chat about improv, we are going to talk about the book you wrote, Improvise Freely. So here it
Mm.
is. I think about it when it was just came out, which is now a year and a half or something like
Mhm.
that. Why a book about improv?
Hmm. That's a good question. There are so many improv books already available. It felt like, adding a drop to an already very full bucket. Um, my reason for writing it really came from some experiences I was having as I was touring the world. Uh, I'm very fortunate that I get to go to different cities and festivals and teach and perform, which I just feel so grateful and so thankful for. And I was noticing that there's been a change that's been happening, and that change has been increasing. And part of that is this fear and anxiety that I'm seeing in classes, not from beginning improvisers, but from intermediate and sometimes quite experienced improvisers. And when I would start, asking questions about, what's going on for them or how they're approaching scenes, or if I was side coaching a scene in a class, there was this common thing that kept coming up, which was, well, I can't do that because of this rule. Or, no, 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 that's not the way you do it. You do it this way because of this rule. Or, this has to happen this way because of this rule. And, improvisation is an art form. And of course, people have the right to explore it as they wish, to find their own joy, to challenge the ideas and concepts and create the work they want to create. But what I was seeing were these blocks that people were learning improv, but what they were learning was creating blocks and fear and anxiety and tension and disconnecting. And that just doesn't make sense to me. How can we be teaching acceptance and listening and support and sharing, and then this is what's happening? Something's off balance there.
Yes.
And that's when I started writing the book, to go, I don't want to see people burst into tears because they learn they can ask a question.
Mm.
I don't want to see people on the side of the stage terrified to go in because it's a transaction scene and you're not allowed to do them. I don't want to see people starting scenes just going into this routine they've been taught they have to do without any authenticity, creativity, connection, awareness, or being present. If people choose to do that because that's the work they want to do, fine. But it wasn't coming from choice. It was coming from obedience and conditioning.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to provide a different option that people could reflect, question, discuss, ask their teachers questions about, just to have a different perspective for anybody that was feeling trapped or locked in. So that's why. just a short reason,
Yeah.
simple reason.
Patti, could I ask you? Well, you're talking about going through your real feelings, and forgetting about formulas. And I guess that's easier to do when you are doing long form narrative. But what happens when people are expecting short scenes and comedy and something funny? This is something that I think could put a lot of tension on a performer, on an improviser, because I have to find the funny thing immediately.
Absolutely. If there is pressure to deliver, then of course that's going to create anxiety and fear. Yeah. And if your group is doing, let's say, corporate shows, and you've sold them a product and you've said, we will make you laugh, you have to deliver that product. I think the answer to that means when you're rehearsing, you need to understand what comedy is, right? So comedy is reactions and responses. It's playing with status, patterns, rhythms, breaking patterns and rhythms. How do you set each other up? And those are not always the things that are explored when people are improvising. So the fear and anxiety to deliver becomes even more heightened because those performers may not have the actual tools needed to understand how to create comedy. But I don't think it's between long form and short form. For me, I understand why improvisers want to use those terms, but I actually think the terms are quite irrelevant. Because if you ask 5 improvisers to define long form, you're going to get completely different definitions.
Yeah.
Right? Outside of length of time. Some people will say long form, you don't ask for suggestions. Well, if a herald is considered the original first long form, they usually start with a word. So it's a suggestion.
Yeah.
Like any definition I've heard could be argued. For me, what you do in a 1-minute scene is exactly what you do in a 1-hour show. It's got the same components. Platform, whose scene is it? Who's being changed? What are the patterns and routines? And it's storytelling.
Yeah.
And for me, storytelling applies to sketch as it does to drama. We're just applying these tools differently. But I think underneath that, improvisers don't trust improvisation. And this is when we start creating formulaic structures to try to survive. And this is when short form starts to have more pressure, because a lot of the games that were originally really great training exercises have now been turned into formulaic structures to get the laugh.
Yeah.
So you're no longer playing the exercise, which allows freedom and creativity and impulse. You're playing a structure which has a narrow lens of delivery.
And with the structure, we come back to the rules. You have to do it in that particular way. Yeah. In your book, you have several topics, I guess, to tackle every rule. You often hear, for example, don't ask any questions. Yeah, and you give a lot of examples how to shift from the rule to the tool. You also say, okay, the rule is perhaps initiated because of a particular reason, but it doesn't, even if you then apply it, it would not solve the issue. Yeah.
Yes.
Could you give, for example, if we talk about don't ask any questions, talk a little bit more about that for that particular example?
Yeah. So if you have an improviser on stage who's only asking questions, right? As a teacher or a director, I'd be going, why are they only asking questions? Why are they relying on questions? Right? So questions can shift the focus to the other player and shift the responsibility to the other player. So with that understanding, I can understand why someone might say, don't ask questions, so that that person can't shift the responsibility. However, why are they shifting the responsibility? Because they're afraid. What are they afraid of? That's where the learning is.
Yeah.
If we don't understand why that improviser needs to shift the focus, we can tell them not to ask questions, but they're going to shift the focus in other ways because we haven't addressed the reason they're doing it. Right?
Right.
Questions can be a great way to stimulate someone's imagination. It can be a great way to raise moral conflict, right? Or intensify relationship, because we do ask questions in life. So questions aren't wrong. It's the type of question we ask, when we ask the question, and why we ask the question, because it's a tool. If I say to you, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Right? I'm putting the responsibility on you.
I don't know, but what would you like to do?
Right? So now we've got two characters that are wimping.
Yeah.
We can choose to make that a pattern and see where it will go. I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And just play, a minute or 2 minutes of how many different ways could we say that,
Mhm.
And that becomes a game of rhythmic pattern. It's a bit of silliness. But I could also ask you, something like, did you sleep with someone last night? Are you having an affair on me?
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And that raises emotional stakes for the characters. It brings in morality and it intensifies relationship. So does it put a burden on the improviser? No. Does it put a burden on the character?
Yeah.
Yes. But that intensifies the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And the characters have an opportunity to change, and yeah, and then you see what's happening in that change or after that change.
Absolutely. So in that example, the question is not bad or wrong. It's useful for the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm asking it because I want to give you something to be changed by.
Yeah.
Because I'm not afraid of the reaction or the response.
Yes.
If you do have improvisers who are only asking questions because they're afraid of taking responsibility or contributing or doing something wrong or not being funny enough, and these are all different reasons why people might hide behind questions, basically that person is wimping.
Yeah.
Right? That's a term, wimping. And then we go, right. So what are they afraid of? Being wrong, making mistakes, letting people down, not knowing what to do. That's lack of confidence. So let's bring them into exercises where they're reminded that their contribution is valued, that their offers will be accepted, that their ideas are fine.
Yeah.
We're not going to judge your creativity because they still understand it here, but they're not applying it.
Yeah.
So if we don't look at, I see you're wimping, why? How do I help you correct that? That poor improviser is going to spend their whole impro life in self-doubt, self-judgment, holding themselves back, never fully contributing. And we had the opportunity earlier on because we saw what was happening.
Yeah. In this case, raising the confidence level through certain exercises and not saying never ask questions again. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we go into, okay, what exercises could be useful? One word sentences.
Mhm.
Because you can't really ask, I mean, you could say why, what, but even then, it's quite a direct contribution. Because a direct why is not wimpy.
Yeah.
You know? Or you could say questions only and then statements only, and you make that fun and you switch it back and forth.
Yes.
You could put them into an expert interview game where they are the person being interviewed. And you say, you're an expert. You know, whatever you say is right because you're the expert. So that they have that confidence. Whatever they say is right. And the person that's interviewing, if they avoid it, if you say, how many geese do you need for the dance routine? And they go, oh, doesn't matter. That's a wimp.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you be specific? 12. Wonderful. You're actually training them to have that confidence to step forward.
Yeah.
Patti, I have a question. Going back to the title of your book about improvise freely. Okay, what some of us or some people might think freedom is a lack of discipline, a lack of being polite, being rude. For example, I'll give you a very quick example. There are situations with the tagging. So you're in the middle of a scene, somebody comes and tags you, and then you think, oh, they didn't allow me to finish my sentence or what I really wanted to express. So that's one of the examples, the tagging. As you say, for example, asking questions because they think, oh, I don't want the other person to think that I am rude and I'm taking over the story and now I am dictating where the story goes. So how much the freedom is involved in being considered rude, impolite, and whatever,
That's a great question. I think that comes down to what is the creative contract within the group? What are the ethics the group is working with? So, at Loose Moose Theater, we worked a lot on how do you inspire your partner. Yeah. It wasn't what am I coming in with? It's what do you need? How do I inspire you? How do I give you fuel? How do I look after you? And how do we advance the scene together? And there's something in the playfulness of that. And also, we trained a lot on, accepting our mistakes, accepting our failure, and failing good naturedly, which helps to remove the anxiety. So I wasn't afraid if the scene would fail or not. It was okay. Right? So that helps me not struggle before the show even begins. So if I know that whatever my players do, the intention is support. The intention is to inspire me. The intention is about the story. If they interrupt me, if they do something, I know it's not a deliberate thing from against me, right? Also, you don't have a group of players fighting for their space. You have a group of players creating together for what it's going to be. So that way, if someone does take a risk, I'm happy to support that. And if they interrupted me, that's okay. Because I'm not questioning, my idea, your idea, why this idea, why did you come in? Because I'm not in a state of internal competition or the anxiety of success or failure, or what am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to get a little bit more what the group is doing. So examples of that for us was in theater sports, we have the horn. So if the judges thought the scene wasn't going well, they'd sound the horn, the lights would come down, you lose the stage immediately. And I know a lot of improvisers go, that's terrible, you're being judged, that's horrible.
I can imagine.
To the audience, it's judgment. To the audience, the nasty authoritative figures have judged us. But I know that the reason the judge gave the horn was because they saw the story wasn't working and they saw improvisers in panic and chaos and were not having a good time. So they're taking the blame so that I can get off stage. So that horn is not a bad thing. That horn is a good thing. But it takes a while to change your mental logic so that I know that that's what that's for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so within your freedom, there is an understanding. There's a formula already, but it's not really a limiting formula. It's a formula of understanding each other, that more or less, yeah.
It's not a formula. I think it's an ethic. It's an ethic and an approach that we all agree to, that that's how we're going to work. And within that, we are giving each other freedom to take risks and make mistakes. And I know that nobody that I'm playing with is ever going to sell me out or do anything to hurt me or make me look bad. So if something accidentally happens, my first assumption is not, why did you do that? My first thing is like, oh, right, okay. We'll talk about that after the show. And it creates a different mental state before you even start to improvise. And I think this is important, and not a lot of groups really have that. People might go, yes, we do agree to yes and or accept, but then when you watch them play, you go, no, people haven't agreed here.
Yeah.
People are saying, I've got your back, and they don't. People want to support, and they're struggling to have their own voice. So in that environment, if you're playing a freeze tag and you get tagged, it feels different. It
Yes.
feels like being shut down, removed, judged, excluded. Yeah, so, and that comes to the ethic underneath it first. If you don't have that, it's hard to have total freedom.
And that happens, as you were saying. Okay, if you know your group, then you already know how to react. But if this is just like one of those jams where anybody can join in, then you don't know the people. They don't know you, and this is when people start getting like, oh, have I been too much, or is that
Mm.
tension of not knowing who you're playing with?
And yet, in that, we've got tools we've been trained in that we're not applying. So, in your beginning pro classes, you will have been trained to listen, to watch, to take time, to notice.
Yes.
But the minute we're on stage, or the minute we feel we need to compete with other people to show that we can do it, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
So if you're in a freeze tag and everybody is fighting for the space, okay, let me invite you. Let me set it up for you. I don't need to compete. Right? How do we make it playful and joyous? Because some of that competition is fear. People afraid of not having their time, their space, their voice. They're wanting to, show what they can do.
Yeah.
And again, that comes down to what is for me, the greater ethic in our work. Improvisation doesn't start by teaching blocking and no blocking games. You actually have to create an environment where people feel safe to start those exercises.
Yeah.
We have to start with nurturing the ethics,
Yes.
because that's how we do what we do. Then we start to do what we do.
Yeah.
Keith said to me once when I was watching him teach, he just came over and he said, watch for the fear, remove the fear.
That's a very strong one. Yeah.
Because fear is what prevents us from listening, playing, being supportive, afraid of making mistakes, taking risks, being open, having our characters be vulnerable. And it's human. I say it's a Keith quote, not because I'm going, ooh, the great almighty Keith, he would hate that. But he said some smart things, and they're his words, not mine. So that's why I'm saying it's his words, because it's his words. The stage is a scary place. You can either improve the armor or remove the fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of the formulaic approach is trying to improve the armor.
Yeah. Yeah. With the rules. With the rules you are tackling in your book. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And removing the fear to allow that freedom. That's different. Yeah.
So, Patti, it has been a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us and for talking about your great book, Improvise Freely. There it is.
So if people
Thank
like to
you.
buy your book, Patty, what's the best approach?
You can find it online at the normal book places. So put it into Google, it'll pop
Okay.
up. If you're struggling to find it, go to my website and email me and I can help you. But I think pretty much if you put it into your search engine of choice, I shouldn't just advertise one. There are many search engines, and find it that way. And thank you so much for your time and your very inspiring questions. You got my brain tugging. I appreciate it.
I think it was really lovely to have this connection from London, UK, from Belgium, and from Australia. Yeah, so
Wow.
that's lovely. Spanning three different time zones.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you both for getting up so early.
uh, thank
Thank you
you,
so
Patty.
much, Patty, for being with us. Yeah, we really enjoyed it. And we also have played a story together, which we will put online as well.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Great.
This was Chats About Improv with SomerSand and our guest, Patti Stiles. Yay!